Seeing who's arriving. Good afternoon, everybody. Just as everybody's arriving here. Wow, we've got I was going to say a rugby team. We've got way more than a rugby team. We've got about a whole tournament going on. Great stuff. Okay, we'll just give a few seconds just to let a few more people arrive. Wow. I'm just recognizing who we've got. We've got people from the UK. We've got people who we've trained. A lot of people from outside the UK as well. That's brilliant. Just recognizing a few people. It's nice if you can have your cameras on. It's not obligatory or mandatory, but if we can see you, it's great. All right, let's crack on. So welcome to this afternoon's webinar. It's Friday, 22nd of November. It's been snowing. I'm Mike Talbot, and I'm here for a conversation with our mediator, Dawn Partington. You want to say hi, Dawn?
Hello, hi. Nice to
All right. I'll introduce Dawn a little more in a second. Just for now, just to mention, this is one of our lunchtime webinars. Part of our 25th birthday celebrations is doing conversations with a mediator where we have a chat, pretty informal, with a mediator from our own panel, which Dawn is, or guest mediators. So there's a couple of other guest mediators coming up on this series of webinars as well. So today we have Dawn. Like I say, if you want to have your cameras on, that's great. It's nice to see you. Please contribute. Stick your hand up. If you don't know already, down the bottom of your screen, there is a heart symbol and a react. And you can, if you press the right arrow just next to react, it shows you how to put your hand up. And when you put your hand up, I'll see a raised hand and I'll try and come to you. We've got Scott on the call as well, so Scott will alert me if I've missed anybody. Make a comment, ask a question. I'll leave a bit of time in the end, but please do chip in if there's anything you'd like to say or ask of me or Dawn. So over to Dawn. Dawn Partington, maybe you'd like to say a little about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background up to the point where you started working with us about 8 years ago, I think it was. So let's hear from you, Dawn, please.
Certainly. Okay, so I've been working within sort of conflict management for nearly 20 years now. So, and I first came across it about 20 years ago. I was living abroad and I had a young daughter, about 5 years old, and when I came back to this country, I felt the need to get involved in the community, really. And I was offered an opportunity working alongside a local authority to get involved in community mediation. So I initially wasn't 100% sure exactly what that meant, but all I knew is that I would be working with neighbourhood disputes, potentially homelessness prevention, and actually working with volunteers and sort of supporting their training initially. That's what I was doing. So I was supporting the manager at the time. So it seemed like a really good opportunity to get a feel for where I was living and understand the dynamics that happens in a community, really, to get to know this new place where I was living. So I was working as an assistant to the manager at the time, and the qualifications that I sort of had weren't really sort of focused on conflict management, but I had done an open university course in social sciences, so that was quite a broad, sort of spectrum, sort of a degree level. So I had a good idea really about society and stuff, and I was fascinated by it. So this seemed like a really good place for me to be. Within about 18 months, I was managing the service, which was fabulous. Really, I wasn't expecting to be in that position, but thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think the remit for the service really was to fill a gap for local authorities, because local authorities were concentrating on their the statutory requirement for low-level antisocial behaviour and issues between neighbours. Nobody was really looking at the relationship that that had broken down, actually. And what we found is that quite a lot of the time it was the relationship, and it wasn't anything that the local authority could do from their end. So they needed somebody to sort of help with that, to sort of minimise and support the complaints and to sort of do everything that they could possibly do reasonably to help these people get on with their lives without it causing too much disruption.
So just for a bit of context, Dawn, this was the service was over in over in Broxtowe, wasn't it, in Nottinghamshire? Just sort of.
That's right. Yes. So it was Broxtowe Borough Mediation Service that I was managing, and we worked. The Broxtowe Borough sort of sits just around the Nottingham city. So we had a really diverse area. So we were working within sort of quite small towns, and then it would go into rural areas. So the variety of cases that we got, I mean, the most popular, but the most common one was noise, because we were living so closely together. But we also got involved in boundary disputes, access to properties, and noises from farms and from animal rescue places, and a real variety of cases that we dealt with. So and part of my role was training volunteers to go out and help other residents with these disputes. So that was the added thing that was probably one of my most favourite parts of the role, to be fair.
Yeah. It's funny, there's quite a few coincidences in where we've come from with that. Around the mid-90s, I was working with Walsall Community Mediation Service, so over in the West Mids, where that one was funded by lottery funding and partly by local authority. But we tried to frame the local authority context in such a way that people didn't think it was the man from the council at the door. Because we had a spiel, as I imagine you guys did, where you go to the door in relation to a neighbourhood dispute, knock on the door, go through the whole thing about impartial mediation, da 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 da, and the person who's answering the door would turn back and go, "Mum, it's the man from the council."
Yes.
So, no matter what you say.
It's fascinating, yes, because that's exactly what we used to get, or that's what I used to get, sort of being in that role. So it was really quite nice to have some very well trained volunteer mediators to go in there that didn't have that agenda. So it just helps with that trust and that rapport straight away. So yeah, definitely.
So the sorts of disputes you were coming across then, a lot to do with noise, which again, that's a similar experience from any community mediation service. I think it's a lot to do with DIY noise, revving cars up, playing music late at night, etc. Dogs barking, etc.
Yeah.
Although the one you mentioned about the animal rescue, that came on our radar as well, just incidentally, where neighbours were complaining that dogs were barking, and the local community police officer had got involved as well. And we thought, well, we'll do what we can to mend the relationship, as you say, and I'd like to come on to that, say a bit more about the relationship aspect of these disputes, to mend the relationship between the proprietors of the dog rescue and the local residents. But what else are you going to do? Ask the dogs to keep it down a bit?
Yeah. There's that element of being realistic, isn't it, and that type of thing. So yeah.
But as you say, it's often the dispute is not down to the allegations and the setup, and whether it's dogs or DIY or cars revving or playing your guitar. It's down to the relationship between the two parties. So, is this the way that you would train the volunteers over at Broxtowe to attend to the sort of the interpersonal dynamics as a priority?
Yes, very much so. Because I think at the time we were there was a I wouldn't say a governing body, but Mediation UK was, they set up a really good framework when it comes to, a little bit like UK Mediation really, when it comes to running a service, when it comes to training, and there was a lot of, there's a lot of similarities with our training that we did back in the day. Although we didn't have so many really good useful tools like the videos and showing examples and that sort of thing. But we certainly do share. We did share those aspects of the training, and what we found was that it was a nice win-win situation, because our volunteers were trained, and what that meant was that they gained extra skills. It was Open College Network accredited course, if I remember rightly, and so they had a new qualification which would help their personal development and their sort of self-development and within the workplace and that type of thing, and they would also go out and do something that they found very rewarding in the community. So it was just a nice place to be. It was a very sort of positive and encouraging place to be. Sort of giving back and then helping people that were willing to get a qualification.
Sure thing. I mean, I remember those early days, my own involvement with community mediation and getting stuck in with that is a very good way to cut your mediation teeth, dealing with some of those disputes. But I thought, wow, you can do this. You can get people to have a conversation and sort it out for themselves. Not suggesting it was easy, and not suggesting that we had success in every case. Far from it. But I thought, whoa, there's something going on here, which is, it's really, I suppose, it's what got me interested in mediation in the first place. But particularly where there's families involved as well, one thing that sticks in my mind is often you would hear there's a dispute between A and B in adjacent houses or adjoining flats. But actually the rest of the family are involved, so it's not 1 and 1, it's 4 and 5 or 5 and 6, and then you discover that actually it's members of the extended family who are part of the context in which that dispute takes place, and there's history. Well, so you're not just, you may be sort of what's in front of you is an interpersonal dispute between two people, but actually it's a lot bigger than that. There's a lot more goes on with these disputes. So at Broxtowe, did you start to, as a lot of community mediation services did you start to branch out and do workplace mediation as well?
We did. We actually branched out initially to do homelessness prevention, and we used those set of skills, or I did primarily. And then when the local authority realised what sort of how valuable it was and what we could achieve, then yes, they because I was sat on the outside of the organisation, it became apparent that actually doing some workplace mediation and helping with relationships within there, and coaching as well. I did some employment coaching there. That they recognised the value of it. They could see that it could be worthwhile, definitely.
Yep. And I think you did some training with Notts County Council. Would that be right, Dawn?
Yes, I did. I think that I found that really beneficial. I think when I first trained, I got a lot of training, and it was a really excellent course, accredited by OCN, and we looked at sort of working between, as you've described, neighbours, and then sort of how that ripples out into the community. But then when we did this training, it was with yourselves, with Nottinghamshire County Council. It was more focused on face-to-face mediation, because what we found was that it was the challenging thing about working in the community is selling the positives and understanding the need for a relationship with your neighbour, that type of thing. Whereas in the workplace, it's more obvious. There's a real need for a decent relationship, a decent working relationship in the workplace. But in the community, that was a little bit more difficult to sell. So I think that was probably one of the challenges that you overcome when you're working in the community, is selling the benefits of it. So moving into workplace, we could help people in dispute. We can find their interests and their motivations for mediation a little easier, I think, because of the things that they need to achieve within their
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as we well know, you know, getting people's buy-in to mediation is one of the key things. That's it's a lot more nuanced than I think people imagine. There's a lot more to it. So, like I was saying slightly flippantly about being on the doorstep, you know, getting people to buy into the idea that you're going to have a chat with this neighbour who you despise and don't want to have anything to do with. All you want is for them to move out and go, or for you to be, you know, particularly if you're in social housing or supported housing, for you to be given a new place. That's all you want. And here's this person on a doorstep, perfectly charming, etc., inviting you to have a chat with this neighbour who really you don't want to know anything about. But you know, we're talking about building bridges and rapport and so on. It's, ooh, no, I don't want anything to do with that. Whereas in the workplace, you know, there is an imperative there. The employer wants its employees to get on. Generally speaking, you know, we spend 35 or 40 hours a week at work where you've got to sit in the same room as the individual and you've got to produce results in order to satisfy your employer. You need to have that conversation, kind of like it or not. You don't choose your colleagues no more than you choose your neighbours, but there is an imperative from the employer that you need to get on with them. So yeah.
And again, like in the community, you do have this ripple effect in the workplace, and that is that it will affect teams and it will ripple out, and especially if it's not you know, sort of tackled reasonably quickly, it becomes something far bigger than you would ever want, and potentially organisations lose really valuable members of staff because that maybe they're not given the opportunity to have a decent conversation.
Of course, yeah. Okay, so sort of fast forwarding a little bit then, Dawn. So, you know, you work very much within our model and our ethos. You've been mediating with us for, is it about 8 years now?
Yes, time flies.
And training and getting fantastic feedback on all of your training courses across the whole spectrum of what we term interpersonal mediation. So just in case, for our audience, just in case you've not heard it before, very briefly, we think about mediation as being commercial, which is contractual financial disputes, which is sort of a little bit drifting off into evaluative settlement conferencing with the influx of legal professionals into the mediation field. So there is that branch. What we attend to are the more relational aspects of commercial disputes. So where people fall out around money and contracts, goods and services, we do it from a non-legalistic point of view, very much a person-centered point of view. That's one. Two is divorce and separation, which we don't have anything to do with. That's definitely sailed off into being a quasi-legal discipline. We're not really into that one for divorce and separation agreements. We will work with couples who are trying to implement an agreement or who have any conflict arising from their divorce and separation, but we don't do the financial contractual bits, the consent orders, etc. And three is interpersonal mediation, which is mostly, I think it's around about 80% of all disputes that come to our case managers are to do with workplace disputes, neighbour disputes, working with families who are trying to stay together, and all and sundry, all the slightly oddball ones, the sort of the outliers, which don't fall into any category, but it's basically about two people falling out. So Dawn, you train for us on workplace, neighbourhoods, family relationships, preventing homelessness, ASB and stuff like that. Yeah. Oh, great. You've just been doing a contract recently for us, well, just this week actually. Tell us a little bit about that. We don't need to say where it was, but what kind of work are those guys involved in? It was a local authority.
Yes, it was another local authority, and I think that I'm seeing a trend in local authorities having a sort of a new interest really in using mediation skills and seeing the benefit really of nipping disputes in the bud, which is what we were talking about for the last couple of days really. And I had a real cross section of people in the room, loads and loads of excellent skills already there, but they were coming from different areas, sort of homelessness prevention, housing, and support work. So where you would go in and you'd support people getting back into the community, back into finding a work opportunity, and or looking to develop their careers and get them back on an even keel really. So we had a really good selection of people there that all brought their own life skills to the training, and I think that's what makes it really nice, is that what I like to do is involve their input as much as possible, and highlight maybe the skills that they already have, in order for them to see that they can use that in having a decent conversation. And I think that a little bit like when I worked in, majority of the time I was working in community, I sometimes don't even use the word mediation. I'm using words like, well, what about having a proper conversation or a decent chat? And we can help you do that. So we were working on those lines, in so much as keeping it as informal as possible, and using those skills within their roles, which is something that we were sort of renaming them and building on those skills for them to use within their role, but then also taking them that step further and probably using those skills in a facilitated conversation, so that they could help with that aspect of moving people forward with a dispute. It's interesting, isn't it? Because they come in when they have their role and they know the skills that they've got, but then they talk about taking their role out, taking their hat off, their usual role, and then putting sort of a mediator's hat on, or a facilitator's hat.
Yeah.
Type of thing. So they really do see the benefit of using these mediation skills within their role, but actually they can see that they could step out of their role and use it to help with their disputes and that sort of.
It's an interesting thing. It's quite a few strands there. One is the fantastic thing, and one reason that we enjoy doing this is the variety of ways that you can apply these skills. So all the things you mentioned there about preventing homelessness, even opening up new career or life opportunities for people, through resolving conflicts, looking at helping people to maintain tenancies, and avoid problems with housing providers, dealing with stuff with neighbours, which is, sort of both of our, that's both where we both got started, I suppose. But also using the skill set that people bring along. And I think this is something people outside the profession don't quite realise. It's not formulaic. It's not just a process. You don't do step one, then step two, step three. There's a lot about who we are and how we sort of come across to the people who are in dispute. It makes a massive difference. And I think there are some people who have a sort of an inherent skill set. They have that ability to quickly build rapport. The ability quickly to understand other people, a really strong capacity for empathy. And those are the things that are very hard to train. Those are the things that are hard to train into people, and that only come with experience, practice, and good feedback, and case supervision as well. All of those bits. But also, I think the other thing is the way, as a great trainer, you can draw people out and say, okay, when you're being a mediator, with a capital M, here's how we do it. But with the small m, mediation skills, you can also build it into being a manager or team leader, also on housing worker, whatever it is, and actually helping people to understand those sort of It's a bit like, well, my original profession was in counselling, and we used to talk about counselling skills, with small c, and then being a counsellor with a big C. Sort of two different things where you've actually got their professional hat on, either being a counsellor or mediator, and then on the other hand, just using those counselling or mediation skills to enhance your day-to-day role. So it's an interesting contrast.
Very much so. I think that what is really lovely to see, it's really encouraging to see, is that the level of enthusiasm there is for incorporating it, and the level of understanding that they understand that actually they need to be impartial. Therefore, there's always a really good conversation about how they would share cases and how they would, so a really nice understanding about the structure. Because yes, you're right, Mike. There is flexibility, but everybody seems to be reassured that there is a solid structure to work within, and sort of getting those skill sets in the right order, if you like, as you're going through the structure. I think it gives people confidence to have a go, because there may well be a little bit of fear, a little of trying something new, that sort of thing. So and it always makes them smile, because they say, no, we don't do role play, we don't like role play. But it's amazing that once they get into it, that they can really see the benefit of trying and using a different language set, trying to approach things differently. So so for me, when I'm training, I think that I really do enjoy them, that they are enthusiastic enough to just try something new, and that they can have a little bit of fun as well while they're doing it. So there's quite a lot of BAFTA award-winning performances in role play. So so that is, and I don't know what everybody else thinks, but I think that we learn better when we're having a little bit of fun too.
Definitely, I'd certainly support that. I think and our more intensive courses, 40-hour courses, pretty hard work, not just for the trainer, but for the learners as well. So actually, to lift it a little bit with a bit of humour, a little bit of people pushing their, sort of going slightly outside their comfort zone, which is particularly, the opportunity within role plays, or if we call them case simulations, then people don't think they're role plays. That chance to actually go outside your comfort zone a little bit, try something different. So you, Dawn, like all of our affiliates, you do both mediation cases and training, and there's something that I've stipulated right from the start, so that upon, on training courses, you've got your war stories, you've got your to tell about cases. And of course, doing training and getting all of the questions and all of the experiences of learners helps us to get better at our subject. Really helps us to really dig deep and question ourselves about our practice. And when people say, "Why do you do it that way?" For us to ask ourselves those questions, it's really important for lifelong learning and our personal development, professional developments. But it's great to have the war stories to bring to courses as well, and often on evaluations and feedback we get from training. Learners draw this out. They say it was brilliant that the trainer had so many examples that they could talk about. So for you, with many years of mediation experience, Dawn, what's a case or two that sticks out for you? Something like, we're always careful not to identify any place or anybody, but what's a case that sticks in your mind from all of the many cases you've done?
I think that one case that I've worked on just recently was a workplace mediation case, and there've been quite a few. And when I'm doing training, the question is always asked: what's the worst case you've ever had to mediate? And I always sort of reframe that a little bit, and I say, well, the most challenging, or the one that I've learned most from, are the examples that I normally give. And I think that with this particular case, I think that it was my learning from this particular case was that, we might have done, I might have done quite a few cases in lots of different areas, but actually the learning is not to get too complacent. I think that I recently had a workplace mediation case, and I felt like I'd been given a really good workout. I think that the case was between two professionals, and one was a project leader, and the other was a team leader within the project. So we had, somebody that was coordinating the whole process, the whole project, and then we had a team leader who was very enthusiastic and very keen to take on new challenges. And when they first started to work together, they had a really good relationship. In fact, the project leader was very generous and inclusive, and wanted to mentor this team member because of the amount of interest that they'd shown in improving themselves and sort of learning new skills and that type of thing. Unfortunately, it might have been about 12 months into this, sort of 2.5 year project that the project leader was diagnosed with, sort of quite a serious health condition, and was away from the project for 6 months, 9 months, something like that. This was a serious health diagnosis, and although when they returned back into their role, they were still having treatment, so they were still in recovery, really. What happened while this project leader was out of the workplace was that the team member stood up and took on some of the big challenges that the leader was taking, and but during that time the team member felt that this was really quite a stressful time for them. They struggled with the workload, and it became very clear that some of the decisions that were being made weren't quite as good as they could have been. There was no other support for this team leader that had stepped up. So when the project leader returned back, they stepped back into a sort of quite a confrontational, quite a defensive relationship, because as the project leader became more familiar with what had been done in their absence, there were some real problems with what had been done. So disagreements about how things were done, really, and lots of hearsay, that sort of thing. So the challenges were that there was a big power imbalance within that relationship now, and there was still sort of issues with this project leader getting back into the fold, if you like. So when we sat down and we did the private meetings, and I got a good idea about what their motivation was, what their interests were, we decided that yes, a face-to-face meeting would be the right way. It would break the ice and get them, sort of talking together, which they hadn't been able to do. Their relationship had broken down completely. So getting them in the room, there was a real tension there, because the project leader was very competitive in his approach to that relationship, and he wanted control back of his project, and the team leader was feeling very defensive and a little bit overwhelmed, I think, by this interaction. And I think that although they were both willing to have this conversation, I felt during the face-to-face meeting, I was challenged about the way in which I was managing the meeting, and in a situation like that, there is a need to be as diplomatic and as gracious as possible, and keep that rapport going. So I had somebody in there that had a knowledge of how these mediation meetings work. If they hadn't been involved in it before, they certainly had done some research. So So that was quite interesting in that respect. So
Okay.
it was a real test of my impartiality in that regard. So so we managed that, and I think the important thing about managing that is to check in with yourself and make sure that you're not being influenced, or you're not being sort of your impartiality isn't being challenged in that respect. So we were having we were helping them find things that they could agree with. They were having very frank conversations, but I was very much aware that I had to keep checking in with both of them to see if they were okay, if they needed a break, and if they were still willing to have a conversation, because the conversations were very direct, and I felt that there was a real need for them to take a break and reflect on what was being said. There were challenges about note taking within the meeting, which needed to be dealt with, and again, this is what's really good about having this structure, is that I could refer then to the structure and the skills that we were using within that face-to-face meeting. It was good to have that to sort of reaffirm that actually this is how it works, and this is we do take notes if needs be. I think that the team leader was becoming I was noticing that she was becoming very upset, and she was trembling, and again offered some time out, because we have a duty of care to make sure that everybody's are working on an even keel, really, and that everybody's not feeling overwhelmed by anything in that respect. I think that some comments were made, some sort of really uncomfortable things were being said, and one of the parties decided that was enough, and they had to leave the room. So what we ended up doing was having a little bit of shuttle mediation. So what I did was, in order to sort of try and get them back into the room together, did a little bit of shuttle mediation between the two of them, just reiterating the things that they'd come to an agreement on, because there were 2 or 3 things that yes, they both agreed that this is the way forward, and that they agreed that how the project would be managed in the future, and that type of thing. So what we found in there is that the shuttle mediation just reaffirmed where they were in order to get back to that face-to-face meeting. Unfortunately, what happened after that was that a member of the family was taken ill, and one of them had to leave the mediation. So we had to close the mediation probably a little bit earlier than we would have liked, and without a complete agreement or a written agreement. But what they had achieved was a really in-depth understanding of how they were going to work together in the future. So that was really helpful for them, because when they started back, this was on a Friday, when they got back into the workplace on the Monday morning, they both knew what to expect from each other. So I think my learning from that is that not to get too complacent. You know, we can think, oh yes, it's a workplace mediation, and these are the normal issues that we would deal with, and also to realise that actually the idea is that they get to a place where they're comfortable, and they may not need a written agreement, which they didn't in this instance. They
Sure.
might need to sort of break the ice and come to a better understanding.
Yeah, it's a lovely example. Lovely example. I didn't. I had no idea what case you were going to talk about today, but yeah, I do recall that one, because you did it for us not so long ago. But it reminds me of a few things, Dawn. I enjoy the way you describe it. It's back to some boundaries. So around the confidentiality, no note taking, because that could be a power play as well. You know, I'm writing down everything you say. It could be a power play. So no note taking is a very strict boundary we have. The role of the mediator. So for you to maintain your impartiality, and you've had to hang on to your chair at points during that case in order to maintain your impartiality, because there's a bit of acting out. And I think the thing you describe about one of the parties challenging what you're doing as mediator on the basis that they've got some experience or they've read a book about it,
Mm,
that's a tough one. So having to hang on again, hang on to your be clear about your role and stick to this authoritative position. So although the mediation is a very empowering process where we put the participants first, actually they do need to allow you to exert a little bit of authority over process, not over
indeed.
what they discuss, but how it happens. And then the other thing I like about your example is that we didn't end in some highfalutin fancy agreement, which again is a bit of, I think, people outside of the field or people new to the field can get a little bit hung up on that every mediation has to result in a written agreement. And we count them all up, and at the end of the year, we can put on our website that we got a 99% agreement rate. It doesn't work like that, as well we know. And in this case, you've built the interpersonal bridge between them. They cleared the air. They managed to have a conversation,
They do.
uh, which was something that they'd not done. There was a lot of, by the sound of it, it wasn't all affirmative and cozy and supportive, the exchange between them. There's quite a lot of challenge going on and quite a lot of difficult things being said. And when they got back to work on the Monday, they had a much better idea about where they were in their relationship. They'd had a chance to offload. They'd built some dialogue with your fantastic support, and they were in a much better place
Mm,
and didn't have to have it all written down in a contract, which is fine.
I think that's it. I think that for me as well, when you were summarising that, I was also thinking that it is their way forward. It's not the mediator's way forward. And as you say, it would be lovely if we could have taken it and written everything down for them, but they really need it. So that was it's theirs, isn't it? It's that ownership.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. And also the flexibility that we have to bring to the process sometimes. So, you said, and I decided to get them together for a face-to-face. That seemed like the right thing to do. Sometimes it isn't.
No, no.
And then you've had to dip out to do shuttle because of how the temperature raised, and you needed to, sort of address that aside from the more intensive face-to-face setting. So back in shuttle, do your work there so that they could then carry on and maintain the progress that you were making with the case. Yeah, it's a really nice example.
Thank I find that in the community we did more shuttle mediation than we do within the workplace. So that was something else that was interesting, and that I was able to use that skill set there.
Yeah,
Again, it's all about how valuable that relationship is. So shuttle seems to work more effectively in the community.
absolutely. We had a service come to us a little while ago who said we'd like some training in running joint meetings, running face-to-face meetings. And I knew the service. I think we'd done training or supervision with them years and years ago. And I was slightly surprised. I said, so you don't do any face-to-face meetings? No, we do everything in shuttle,
Mm-hmm.
every case. And it was around neighbourhoods, ASB, neighbourhood ASB, basically, dispute. Mostly working in it was an inner city service, mostly working in big blocks of flats.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
And going from neighbour to neighbour to neighbour, shuttling, wearing a groove down the corridor, as I like to say, and never bringing people together. Very effective what they did, but they were starting to ask themselves whether it would be beneficial as well to have the option for face to face. So we went in and they were very skilled mediators, but just wanted to know how to run the face to face joint meetings better and how to manage disruptions in particular.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It takes confidence, and that confidence builds, doesn't it, to be assertive without breaking that rapport that you built. So you need to manage those disruptions to keep the meeting on track, but you also want to keep that rapport with your clients. So
Absolutely, and I think one way of thinking about that is sometimes it's a thing we that comes from sort of therapy days is balancing support and challenge. So you need enough support that they feel safe to get in the room and have that encounter and trust the mediator is going to keep it okay, but actually enough challenge that something happens. So the challenge is to actually get in the room for a start, but then the challenge is to answer one another's contributions, is to ask the difficult questions of one another, is to say the difficult things that can provoke strong emotions. So it's getting enough support that we feel safe enough to engage, but enough challenge that actually something happens and some change takes place.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, lovely example. Very nice. Okay, remarkably, we're out of time. So I just got a quick question there from Joe. Have you worked with gangs? Have you done any work with gangs?
I haven't, no, but I have worked with people that have worked with gangs before. It was an ex policeman that specialised in it, actually. And when I listened to a presentation that he gave for us as part of a network I was part of before, it was absolutely incredible. And so there are organisations there. He's still out there, and that do it, and they stick within, they work within a confidentiality policy, where they say if it unless it endangers somebody's life, they will keep that confidentiality. All sorts of things. Fascinating area to work in, but I haven't. But I have known people that have.
We've had some work with gangs. I'd love to say it was successful and fantastic and brilliant and beautiful. It wasn't. It was a bit messy, really. Partly because of, with the work we did, it was with in a large city. There was a lot of kudos for gang members about not engaging with other gangs. If you spoke to somebody else from another gang, you were actually in trouble. So the idea that a mediator would get involved, and we were training the youth workers and some of the community workers to actually do the stuff. But the gang members would not come to a place where they would talk together. We tried doing shuffle. That was quite hard of itself as well. So yeah, we've done a bit of gang work. I'm sorry to say it wasn't very successful. Joe, I hope that not a great answer, but that answers your question. We've got a comment here for you, Dawn. Get ready to blush. Thanks very much for allowing me to hear your conversation. I echo you, Mike. How great Dawn is as a trainer. She inspired me to be the best mediator I can be. And the messenger makes reference to your comment about not getting over complacent. It's a good reminder for a planned mediation that they have next week. Okay, so that's that person. And somebody's seen that and said a very nice message. Okay, and then a comment from somebody from Zippy who says mediation sessions don't always end up in agreement, but without a doubt they transform the people. I think that's an important comment, Zippy. So with all the variety of mediations that there are, I've mentioned about evaluative settlement conferencing, which tends to be the preferred sort of approach from legally trained professionals. And then there's facilitated mediation, which covers a lot of different approaches. Our sort of model, our way of working is more down the transformative end of that. So we're looking to transform the relationship between the people. And often the side effect of that is it transforms the people. It transforms how they think about themselves in conflict, how they think about the other party. So it is quite a transformational process. And the idea that it has to always result in a written agreement, no, not at all. Okay. So couple of other comments here. So some great stories, says Gerard. Thanks, Gerard. A comment from Colin says some people have used sport, particularly football, as a way of bringing gangs together in a shared, safe environment. There's some lovely work as well. If you probably find it if you Googled it, around using food as a way of bringing people together. The idea, very, very archaic idea, back into almost prehistoric times. The idea of peace building around the campfire, peace building around the with a meal, sharing food as a means of finding common ground and building dialogue and building rapport. But sport, fantastic, football as well, bringing gangs together. That's from Colin. And Joe says, thanks. I did my training with you around 12 years ago, and I'm now wanting to develop a project on community mediation for my CIC. Oh, fantastic, Joe. That's really good. Okay, nice. Right, I think we better wrap it up. We've got one or two people dropping off already. So we do say about 3/4 of an hour. So massive thanks to you, Dawn.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed it. Thanks.
Great. And great to see you. See you again soon. Thank you very much for everybody attending and for your comments and questions. Love it when people join in. We have a whole program of other webinars. You can check that out on our website. Check out our social as well. Some really good stuff on there. We look forward to seeing you on our next webinar in about a month's time. There's a list just popped up there in the chat box. There's a link that will give you a schedule for all the forthcoming webinars, and you can join. You can sign up there as well. These are available after today as well. There's an archive of webinars that you can visit, go and have a look at. Okay. Parting comment is from Swati, who says, I joined from India. Great to hear you both. Thanks very much. You too, Swati. Okay, that's bye for now. Bye from us. All the best to you. Have a good weekend. Don't fall over in the snow. See you next time.